Hello and welcome to today's webcast. I'm delighted to be here today to share new updates to our portfolio as we continue our focus on ransomware recovery in a multi-cloud world. Joining me today, I have special guests, Deepak Verma, who is the VP of Product Management here at Zerto, and I have Phil Goodwin from IDC, who is the VP of Research, and they will be joining me today in a few moments. But first, what I'd like to do is talk about the challenges that we hear from our customers. First challenge that we hear, of course, is ransomware. It's prevalent. And this has become now a C-level initiative, a board-level initiative. And it's not a matter of if, but when an attack happens. And so it's really important to have a recovery plan in place. Second, it's about cloud complexity. We're seeing an acceleration of cloud adoption, as we've seen with COVID and work from home, and it continues. And so our customers are asking us for help with regards to migrating to cloud. How do I get the most out of my cloud strategy? And really making it easier for them. And lastly, as organizations are building their digital business and building out new initiatives, downtime is no longer an option. There is that need for a 24/7 business with no downtime and no data loss. To dig deeper into these challenges, we commissioned IDC to take a closer look at the ransomware and disaster recovery needs to solve these challenges. IDC conducted a survey of over 500 respondents, of IT and business leaders across all industries of about 17 different countries of medium to large scale organizations. And I'm delighted to have Phil Goodwin from IDC, who is the VP of Research, here with me today to share insights into this new research. So, Phil, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Hey, it's great to be here with you, Caroline. Really a pleasure to share these findings with the audience.
Perhaps we could start with a high-level summary of the research that you conducted and what some of the key findings from that survey.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you mentioned, Caroline, this is a study that has been ongoing for the last several years. So we found some very interesting new data as well as some updated data, some changes in the way the market is addressing or dealing with ransomware and downtime. And one of the things that we found right off the bat is that unplanned downtime continues to be a major issue for organizations. In fact, 93.6% of organizations reported that they had dealt with unplanned downtime in the last 12 months. And even though systems are getting more and more reliable, it's clear that organizations have to be prepared for that downtime to recover from it, both at an application as well as a data level. The other thing that we found is that 59.6% of organizations had to deal with unrecoverable data in the last 12 months. That was surprising because it was up from 43% in the study we did previously. So it's even worse than it has been in the past. And what we find is that it is really this unrecoverable data that I believe is the cardinal sin of data protection, of not being able to recover that data. And yet it's getting worse for many organizations than it has been in the past. The most surprising thing that we found in this, though, Caroline, is that 79% of organizations reported having to elicit a disaster response in the last 12 months. In other words, to trigger that response. 61% of those were a result of malware or ransomware, although it's fair to note that hardware and software failure reasons were even higher. But I find this number to be very interesting because it is so high. Certainly 79% of organizations haven't been hit by natural disaster and so forth. But what I think we are finding is that the nature of disaster responses has changed. 20 years ago, in the 9/11 era, we really thought of disaster recovery as moving from data center 1 to data center 2 when you got hit by a hurricane or a flood or a terrorist attack or something of that nature. Now I think we're really dealing with what I would call more of a micro disaster recovery, where we're recovering at an application level. Because if it may be a result of ransomware that only hits an application or a few applications, but still requires that kind of disaster response, the movement of a workload from one location to another in order to be able to recover that application, I think has become the new nature of disaster recovery responses.
And so those numbers are quite startling for ransomware and malware. And as we know, ransomware is top of mind for all organizations. So can we talk more about, say, the findings in the research about ransomware and the challenges that are associated with recovery and the existing legacy technologies that organizations have?
Yes, there are really some interesting things there. When we ask organizations the nature of the attack that they had suffered, phishing was not surprisingly the number one attack. Phishing oftentimes is not the end goal of the attacker. And in fact, you can see from the data in the survey that only about less than half of attacks, phishing attacks, resulted in corrupted or lost data. But they are the tip of the spear. It's how the bad guys get into the systems to be able to install the malware or steal the credentials or whatever it is they're happen to be after. What I did find interesting in this, Caroline, is that incidences of data exfiltration were actually among the highest incidences of data attacks that IT organizations experienced. And right behind that were internal malicious attacks. You know, in the IT organization, we kind of like to think, you know, none of us would ever do that. But in fact, it is absolutely a problem. And organizations need to be able to prepare for situations where they have been attacked maliciously from internal bad actors, whatever it might happen to be. You can also see that ransomware is not far behind there with 2.3 attacks per year reported by organizations. And there's a high correlation of successful attacks, as you can see from this chart, whether it's for data exfiltration or internal malicious attacks or ransomware or whatever it might happen to be, in terms of those successive attacks that have corrupted the data or caused a loss of data. Now, one of the things I want to return to in these topics here, Caroline, is the issue of unrecoverable data. As we talked about, that is kind of the cardinal sin of data protection. And so we delved into some of the reasons that organizations are struggling to be able to recover data. And what you can see here in those 60% of situations, or for those of you who are perfectionists at home, remembering it's 59.6% from slide number 1, is that the number one reason that data is unrecoverable is backup system failures. The number 3 reason is data loss that occurred between the backups or in the backup gaps. To me, Caroline, this is really fundamental blocking and tackling. This is deploying appropriate systems and managing them appropriately so that they function the way they should and that the data can be recoverable. Now, the number 2 reason was corrupted data due to malware or ransomware. And the interesting thing there is that there was a significant difference between Europe and North America. In Europe, the incidence was 60%. In North America, it was 42%. And I can tell you that this is consistent with my colleagues in the data security side of IDC, who find that there are higher incidences of malware and ransomware corruption in Europe than there are in North America.
Now, ransomware is certainly a driver for data modernization, and so we see that cloud has really accelerated during COVID and continues to do so. And it looks like the research is showing that most organizations that, are adopting a cloud-centric data protection strategy.
That's exactly right, and that's a very good point. What we found is the public cloud continues to play an extremely important role in both backup as well as disaster recovery. When we ask organizations whether or not they use public cloud for backup and disaster recovery, only 9% of organizations say they don't use the public cloud for either one. 13% said they use it for disaster recovery only. 32% said they use it for backup only, but 46% said they use it for both. So you can see that public cloud plays an important role. Now, what this data here doesn't tell us is the intensity of that use. It could be a single application or it could be a minor part of the organization. So we ask organizations to tell us the importance of public cloud. And here what we found is that when it comes to backup, nearly 70% of respondents told us that public cloud is either important or extremely important to their backup strategy. And when it comes to DR, more than half of organizations said that it is either important or extremely important to their disaster recovery. So you can see here, Caroline, that public cloud is both ubiquitous in terms of its use and extremely important in that use itself.
So thank you, Phil. Are there any last thoughts from IDC that you would like to share with the audience today?
No, I think the most important things that came out of this research is that organizations really cannot overlook that fundamental capability of data protection and recovery, again, that blocking and tackling, having the appropriate systems in place, but also having systems like continuous data protection that can reduce that gap, to have reliable modern applications that will function and be able to recover data upon demand. The other thing that I think is so important is that I do believe we are moving into more of an application-centric era, where organizations are preparing to recover at an application level or a workload level, dare I say, micro disaster recovery types of situations. I think that's where the industry is moving. Cloud is a very important part of that, and I think this research has really highlighted a lot of those points.
Thanks again, Phil, for being here today with us to share these insights.
My pleasure, Caroline.
So, as Phil shared, ransomware absolutely is pervasive. And we talked about the fact that ransomware is not a matter of if, but when. But as we see from this survey, it's not so much also when, but how often. And that has changed the way that we look at ransomware, certainly from a recovery perspective. And it becomes even more critical as we look at building out a recovery strategy as part of your overall ransomware strategy. And let me share with you a tale of 2 ransomware attacks. And this is with our customer, Tenkata Protective Fabrics. They are a multinational textile manufacturing organization, and they suffered 2 ransomware attacks. The first attack was without Zerto, where they were using backup to tape and to disk. And then the second attack was with Zerto, having deployed our continuous data protection. Now, both attacks were of the crypto locker strain. The second attack was of a more sophisticated strain. And the first attack was affecting their whole server. And then the second attack, the files on a server. So let us look at the difference and the outcome of those 2 attacks. And so the recovery time prior to Zerto, so using the backup to tape and to disk, it took Tenkata over 2 weeks to recover. With Zerto and our continuous data protection, with our journaling and replication technology, they were able to recover in less than 10 minutes. That's a huge difference. Second, let's talk about data loss. In the first attack, Tenkata suffered up to 12 hours of data loss. That's a huge impact to the business. The second attack, the data loss was less than 10 seconds. And you're able to do that through our journaling technology to be able to recover within seconds of an attack. So you can see the outcome to these 2 ransomware attacks are very different with Zerto and without Zerto. So as we look at Zerto and our core differentiators that we deliver to an organization is threefold. First, it's delivering that fastest time to recover, to be able to recover within minutes and at scale. And second, we can resume business operations within seconds of an attack. And lastly, it's about having confidence in your recovery plans. You can test anytime, anywhere, even in business hours, without any impact to production, ensuring that you have confidence in your recovery plan for when the inevitable happens. And so today we continue that journey to solve for the ransomware recovery challenges in a multi-cloud world. And I'm delighted to have Deepak Verma, who is our VP of Product Management here at Zerto, to share with us new updates as we continue to focus on ransomware recovery in a multi-cloud world. Deepak?
Thanks, Caroline. I'm going to go over the product updates that we've had for the first half of this year. But before I do that, let me talk about the vision of Zerto as part of an HPE organization now. It really hasn't changed. Over the last 12 years, Zerto has delivered disaster recovery products for the on-prem data centers. We started with VMware. And as customers' landscapes have evolved, we evolved with that as well and started supporting service providers, started supporting public cloud. Last year, we announced support for SaaS platforms as well as next generation applications, including Kubernetes. And our vision stays the same, which is we want to provide you with the continuous availability that Zerto has always provided. And now in a changing world of more ransomware attacks, we want to provide you the platform that is going to deliver you with most amount of confidence in being able to recover. So I've broken the updates into a couple of categories. What I want to cover from a ransomware recovery standpoint is our focus on immutability. Then I'll talk about our focus on some of the platforms we've expanded into. And lastly, what we're doing with the platform to enhance the security. So let's get into each one of these areas. So jumping into immutability. One of the things that we released that you can enjoy now is the ability to have immutable copies within Azure data stores. So Zerto has been able to write long-term retention data into Azure Blob Data Store. And with immutability, you can set those locks now and really use that immutable copy as your copy of last resort if everything else fails. We also added immutability onto S3 compatible storage for whether it's on-prem or in other public forums or public platforms. This is a requirement that a lot of customers came up with where they're divesting and putting more of their data in different platforms. So having immutability on S3 compatibility kind of became a natural progression for us. Continuing in the theme of immutability, we added the capability of having immutable copies of Azure Active Directory. Last year, we had introduced Zerto Backup for SaaS applications, which covered products such as Office 365, among others. This year, the product was enhanced to add the capability of backing up Azure Active Directory data, as since most customers have moved to that for their Active Directory information. With the immutability, you're able to not only back up Azure Active Directory in a granular manner, but also perform search and recovery operations at a granular level. The immutability provides that added protection of having the data backed up from Azure Active Directory be immutably stored so that it can be recovered without any manipulation. We also added capability to write long-term retention copies to Google Cloud storage platform specifically. So this, again, was an ask that you as customers had for us, so we've extended that feature as well. Switching gears away from immutability, we've also added the capability of performing instant file restores for Linux file systems. Zerto's always had the capability of restoring Windows file systems straight from the journal. You can recover files and folders in addition to virtual machines, whether they be Windows or Linux. The Linux file restore capability allows you to now restore files and folders straight to the source from the Zerto journal. This provides you with a very low RPO and RTO for Linux operating systems. This is in conjunction with our instantaneous restore capability from the journal for virtual machines, which were always supported for Linux and Windows file systems. To improve the overall handling of the restore process, we've unified the workflow and provided you a more efficient workflow to be able to restore files with a single click-through operation, both for the Windows as well as Linux operating file systems. A couple of other additional updates that we've made to the platform itself. For you Azure customers out there, we've improved the efficiency of how APIs are handled within Azure. So now we can scale quite a bit more within Azure regions and allow you to have less Zerto infrastructure in place as you scale up the number of VMs that you're protecting to or in Azure. We had a request from many of our customers to exclude specific volumes from being replicated. So Zerto always had the ability to exclude temp volumes, but certain volumes and workloads needed to be excluded completely either to reduce the amount of network costs or storage costs. So we've added that capability where we'll allow you to completely exclude volumes from being replicated in your virtual machine environment. We also added the ability to have role-based access controls as well as multi-factor authentication for a lot of the services you get, such as Zerto, Zerto Analytics, etc. This is going to allow you to really tighten down not only the number of people that can have access to it, but also what access they have, and multi-factor authentication allows you to secure the environment quite a bit, disallowing loss of username, passwords, etc. Moving on with our product updates, we added the capability of having login banners, both pre and post login to the ZVM. So if you're, for example, a federal entity and you require a disclaimer before login to the Zerto interfaces, you can now add that disclaimer before the login screens. And you may want to use that in the private sector as well to disallow non-authorized users from accessing the system. One interesting thing, along with the themes of ransomware recovery that we started getting from a lot of customers, is running extended DR tests. So with Zerto, you are always able to run very quick DR tests, test your environment, move on from your DR test. It's one of the things that the customers loved about the Zerto platform. But with ransomware recovery and also with ransomware protection, a lot of customers have started running tests a lot longer. So this is a situation where a customer might bring up a test environment and actually use some external tools to run elongated tests. And with elongated tests, you need more disk space. So what we did to support the elongated DR tests is really separate both the journal and the scratch disk space, allowing you to run longer DR tests without having to run out of journal capacity. In the background, disaster recovery still continues. For our managed service providers out there, we added a long-term retention feature set to your service profile. So now you can start offering long-term retention as part of your disaster recovery as a service offering to your existing customers by setting profiles and rules up with long-term retention as well. We will also be rolling out a major update, which is providing support for Linux as the platform for ZVM. So I can hear the virtual applause from many of you. This has been asked from a lot of you over the years. We're finally rolling out the first version of the Linux appliance for the ZVM, and it's going to be phased out over the next couple of releases, but the first phase really gets us out the door with some of the core DR capabilities. Why I'm excited about this is it makes updates very easy. It'll be delivered as an appliance that can just be booted up inside your hypervisor environment. But more importantly, it adds a lot of security enhancements such as integration with LDAP, as well as multi-factor authentication and role-based access controls. So we really are able to deliver a secure platform. And why I'm excited about this is because a lot of customers, a lot of you out there, use Zerto as your first place to recover, and we want to make sure that we have the lowest attack surface area possible so that we're up and running as you try to recover your virtual machines in the unfortunate event that they have been affected by ransomware. So with those updates for the immutability of data, expanded platforms, as well as security within the platform itself, what we're doing is providing you Zerto as your ransomware recovery platform in a multi-cloud world. And we'll continue to expand our platform as we progress through the year. So look forward to some of those updates.
Thank you, Deepak. As we talked about at the beginning of the webcast, we talked about the cloud complexity, how organizations are adopting a cloud strategy, and that has accelerated over the course of COVID and work from home. And they're looking at ways as to how do I migrate to the cloud? How do I get the most out of my cloud strategy? And as we've seen today, there are many updates that Deepak has shared with us to add resilience to the cloud. We have been working very closely with our strategic partner, AWS. We've been working with them over the course of the last year to add 2 new offerings to our portfolio. And in fact, we've been working with them over the course of many years now. And let me hand over to Deepak to share the latest updates with AWS.
Thanks, Caroline. So when you look at AWS, we've had a number of features and capabilities available over the years. Our core capability was the ability for you to take your on-prem infrastructure, be it VMware, and replicate that to AWS as your DR data center. So the to-from capabilities. We also expanded that capability by having AWS as your backup target. You could take Zerto's long-term retention feature set and write your data from a backup standpoint into an AWS S3 bucket with tiering, immutability, etc. So that covered that use case. As we progressed over the years, we added the capability of having migration. So a lot of folks out there want to be able to not only replicate to AWS, but eventually migrate their primary workloads into AWS. So Zerto provides you that migration capability into AWS as well. Last year, we had introduced Zerto for Kubernetes, which not only allows you to perform disaster recovery and backup, very similar to the VMware environment, from on-prem Kubernetes platforms into an AWS EKS environment, but also allows you to perform replication for EKS environments between region to region. The most recent update that we had was Zerto in-cloud replication and protection for AWS workloads. Then this allowed us to go AWS region to region across regions from disaster recovery environments. So we've got quite a plethora of services and options and features available for AWS customers out there. We made some enhancements within the AWS environment as well. I'll go through those real quickly. For the AWS in-cloud replication, region to region that is, we added a simplified protection group creation mechanism. So some of you that don't like using the GUI asked us to deliver a mechanism where you could extract outputs from the AWS APIs and command set and import it straight into the Zerto command set as you're setting up your replication groups. This capability has been added in there. You can easily create your VPGs now. We also added the capability of sending all of our Zeek AWS Zeek logs straight into CloudWatch. And what this allows you to do is have a consolidated environment of having all of your alerts and log information sent, and CloudWatch is the preferred method within AWS, so you can now integrate all of the Zerto logging for Zeek into that environment. We also added support for Zerto Analytics for the Zeek workload. So now when you're performing replication region to region within AWS, you can send your data to Zerto Analytics and visually view all of your replication environment and statuses just as you have with your environments over the years. And so as we progress with our product development, I look forward to updating you with our future releases later this year.
So thanks, Deepak. So that concludes our webcast for today. We have heard from Phil Goodwin on new research. And to find out more about that research, there is a white paper that you can download that has the full findings of the research study that we talked about. And in addition, there are several demo videos that you will see, and I encourage you to take a look at those videos because they share how we can recover from multiple different scenarios when attacked with ransomware. And then lastly, for those of you who are new to Zerto, please check out the Zerto free edition to get you up and running as fast as possible with Zerto. And finally, we would love to see you at HPE Discover, which is HPE's Edge to Cloud conference. We have a huge presence there with many sessions and a keynote with Ziv Kadem, our co-founder, and you can actually set up executive meetings to meet with us. So please join us for this exciting event. Thank you for attending this webcast today. And I hope that you found the updates valuable for your organization as you're looking at solving ransomware recovery in a multi-cloud world. Thank you.